good? All right. Welcome, everyone. We'll call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Oregon City, September 23rd, 2024. Ms. Newman, can you call the roll, please?
Can't hear you in the back.
Okay. Testing in the back. I can only get the mic so close. How's that? Okay. All right.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Here.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Commissioner Laws?
Here.
Commissioner Dole?
Here.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Here.
Commissioner Espy is excused for illness. Chair Stoll?
Here. All right, we'll move on to item 2, approval of the minutes. Any motions or discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the August 12th, 2024 minutes of the Oregon City Planning Commission.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Call for the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. Move on to item number 3, public comments for topics not on the agenda. We've got 3 comment cards here. We'll start off with Dee Dee Dalsrud.
Hi, my name is Dee Dee Dalsrud. I live in Oregon City for over 50 years. Now I get that fishing license for free. But I'm not here for that. We all know that I am always speaking in regards to trees and tree canopy and the lack of our climate action plan going on in Oregon City. Friends of Trees ain't enough. We have an opportunity to reach out to the Park Place concept, to any new development, because they are restricting our lots so small that you can't even plant a decent tree to grow to maturity. Whether we give up sidewalks, widen sidewalks. Oh, thank you. Whether we widen our sidewalks and or we have to do something. We are losing our canopy, and I don't know if the rest of you, but it's on Facebook and everything else, I've noted for 2 years that we do not have our birds. We don't have bugs. And I don't care how many flowers we plant, but if we continue with pesticides and fertilizers and the continuing of droughts, we need to save every mature tree we possibly can to help us counteract these changes. We're reducing our habitat, we're planting designer trees that do not grow at a length and a height where you can have our raptors and our migrating birds go through. I counted 1 robin in my yard this year, and I usually have 40. 1 robin. And my persimmon tree usually has a whole plethora of birds coming through all winter long because it's frozen fruit in November. And there were like 17 birds, and I should have 70 in that tree. Start looking around. We need to save every tree we can. Thank you very much. I think we can change code to do that too. If we go at this with a climate action plan and that we need to have these credits, maybe we can pass on a carbon credit to a developer to save the mature native trees. We've lost so many oak trees, it's just heartbreaking. And our tall firs, where are you finding a fir in this town anymore? They're all coming down and they're replaced with little trees that can grow maybe 35 feet, 40 feet, but are designed to die in 45 years. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have Jed Peterson. And I forgot to say this with Dee Dee, but state your name and city residence for the record, please.
I'm Jed Peterson, a resident of Oregon City. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. First, I implore the City Council to reject the proposal. It's clear by that all have attended the previous meetings from last year, the years before, and reviewed the materials from this meeting and previous meetings, that this proposal removes the due process that the public is required to have. This removes the necessary checks and balances. The issue is that there were a number of codified requirements that were ignored in past proposals, and those codified requirements are there for a reason, to protect the safety of the public in terms of walking, in terms of street size, so that emergency vehicles can get into neighborhoods and through areas, in terms of traffic patterns, protect the pedestrians. A lot of these requirements are codified and were ignored in previous proposals, and this new proposal, this new suggestion is that we would remove this process. We would remove the protections of the public. That's not in our best interest, and I implore you to not proceed in this manner. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And last, for items not on the agenda, we have, I can't read the first name, but McCarty is the last name.
Good evening. My name is Lee McCarty, and I too appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm a resident of Oregon City, Oregon. I reside at 16817 South Craft Road in a development known as the Meadow Ridge Estates. I'm speaking on behalf of my family and also on behalf of Meadow Ridge Estates, who would like to lodge and voice concerns regarding the proposed urban growth boundary zoning that falls just below Meadow Ridge Estates, just south between Meadow Ridge Estates, which is outside of the urban growth boundary, and Redland Road. Between Meadow Ridge Estates and Redland Road is a 32-acre tract that falls inside of the urban growth boundary that has very dense zoning recommendations for the near future. Our development, Meadow Ridge Estates, is a small development of 13 estate homes on 2 to 5 acre tracts. These properties, mine specifically and Linda Fields, who's right behind me, our two properties are across the street from each other, and we are adjacent to and probably 30 feet from the 32 acre tracts that have the very dense zoning recommendations. The zoning recommendations are for low density that range from R6, R8 to R10, and medium density that range from 3.5 to 4, from R3.5 to R5. The proposed zoning, in our estimation, for this 32-acre tract flies in the face of and compromises the core values that we believe you've set forth with respect to the urban growth boundary transition from zoning in one area to a zoning in another area, so that effectively you don't have, and I'm going to use a very broad example, a skyscraper sitting right next to a residential estate. The proposed zoning that currently is stipulated in the documents that you've provided could call for 6 homes on a 1 acre tract. It could call for duplex, triplex, quadruplex, townhomes, and multifamily cluster homes right adjacent to these estate homes. Our concern and objection is that the proposed zoning, as I said, does violate the core values that you set forth in the context of how you would transition from one zoning on a property, zoning on one property to zoning on the next property. And granted, the Meadow Ridge Estates is outside of the urban growth boundary. We just wanted to go on record and stipulate our concern for this zoning and ask for consideration in the future that you take a hard look at this transition. Again, I appreciate the time and thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Before we move on to the Park Place Concept Plan Code Amendments legislative hearing, I want to offer up an option for the commissioners to move item 5 up. We'll get the staff out earlier, and we can probably get that knocked out quicker than we can the other. Any agreement, disagreement, any of that? Move item number 5, the staff presentation for McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project, up ahead of the Park Place hearing.
I agree.
Agree? Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to skip number 4. We'll do the staff, and then we'll get to the Park Place hearing. All right.
All right. Thank you, Chair Stoll, Planning Commissioners. My name is Christina Robertson-Gartner, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. And with me, I have Dana Webb, our Public Works Director. And tonight, we are here to give you, provide an update of a year-long project the city's been working with the Oregon Department of Transportation on, and that is our McLoughlin Boulevard Phase 3 design process. It's really a conceptual design to look at the most complicated section of McLoughlin Boulevard. I'm going to pass it over to our Public Works Director for a little bit to provide some context, and then we have about maybe 12 slides to provide just a brief overview of what we've been doing for the last year. And I know I've provided some updates, but this is really a chance for you to kind of see the spectrum of how we got to where we are today, and to let you know that this will be coming in front of you October 28th as a legislative file, and we'll kind of explain the next steps for this project. And one of them is to go through the adoption process to be considered added to the transportation system plan. So.
All right, good evening. As Christina mentioned, I'm Dana Webb, Public Works Director, and I've been leading this project in collaboration with Christina for the last year. This is a grant-funded project. We received grant funding from Metro's Regional Flexible Fund allocation to complete this project development work. And as Christina mentioned, this is the third section. We've been able to design and construct phases 1 and 2, so that section from 205 to 10th Street, and then the section from 205 up to the Clackamas River Bridge in front of Oregon City Shopping Center. So taking on this last section, we just needed a little more, kind of take a step back and look at the remaining section. So Christina's going to lead us off on this presentation.
All right. All right, so the purpose and need of this project is there was a big gap in safe and comfortable facilities. Once you hit 10th Street and we're heading south, there was no way to bike along 99E, and really, while you could walk on the sidewalk, it wasn't a very pleasant experience. And was disjointed, and really for definitely the last 50 to maybe even 75 years, the city has really turned its back on the river, and we've kind of had a highway that's run through our city. So our community, through open houses and the city commission, really challenged staff and the design team to whatever we do to use design and approach to kind of recenter and kind of reconnect to downtown and really support our tourism initiatives, our downtown businesses, open spaces that are future Tumwater Village, as well as our Clackamas Park and connections north. So how do we use design to kind of interconnect that? The goal of this conceptual plan is just that it's a conceptual plan. We looked at how to bring pedestrians and bike along the viaduct part of 99E, which is built in the 40s, as well as put together a streetscape plan for sidewalk and street tree and vegetation improvements along the non-viaduct portions. So the project area is that last phase explained from 10th Street down to the railroad tunnel, right at Railroad Avenue, and the new Tumwater Village, which will be coming in to you sometime this next year as part of their master plan. You'll notice that Main Street has been added into the project area, and that is really the goal to, when you do this kind of conceptual analysis, you have to have a no-build plan. And so the no-build plan, whenever you're doing an alternative analysis, was if nothing was done, where are pedestrian and bikes going to go? And that would be really using signage and wayfinding to have people turn onto 10th Street and then Main. So If no improvements were done to the viaduct and we kept it as is, maybe with some streetscape improvements, then we would be using wayfinding, and bikes would be on sharrows on the street, and folks would be walking on the sidewalks on Main Street. So as part of this process, we held a virtual open house in December, and you'll see kind of the top there, our design team helped with lots of different variations of how we could potentially get bikes and pedestrians along the viaduct section of 99E. And what again, a viaduct is not a bridge because portions of it are on basalt and some portions are not. So it's kind of a bridge structure on top of the rock. And one option even took you all the way down to the river and back up again. Some options, there's different variations. What we heard in the open house was people really wanted to improve traffic flow and really upgrade access for pedestrians, enhance safety. Safety was a big one we heard from the community and the public outreach, and as well as those connections. What we heard from both the public and the Oregon Department of Transportation maintenance staff was whatever we do, whatever is designed needs to be a separate structure that's independent from the viaduct and is designed in a way where their maintenance trucks could continue maintaining the viaduct as is. So as we went through a lot of this design process, we heard a lot of technical direction from ODOT maintenance staff about what they really needed. And what we gave all that work and the ODOT technical work and their geotechnical work and the bridge design folks, and they looked at all the options, and all of them turned out to be not promising. So I'll kind of talk why, and then out of that, they kind of started to think about, well, if none of those were promising, what could we do? So out of that, there was two options, a conventional viaduct and two signature spans, which while technically worked was a bit complicated and not very visually appealing. And really the long span was what ended up being pursued by the City Commission in the spring. And we spent this summer, our design team, doing that analysis of can it be constructible, but more importantly, can it be permittable? So it can construct it and get, kind of fatal flaw analysis about permits. So I like this slide because it provides a really good example of the complexity along the Willamette River. What you see here is called bathymetric readings, and so that's like the opposite of topography. It shows how deep the Willamette River is. So the darker the blue, the deeper it is, and the lighter the blue, the shallower it is. And so where you see the numbers where it says bent 1, bent 2, bent 3, that's where they were looking at potential structural supports for all the options that we were looking at the December open house. So those had a lot of individual pillars onto the basalt. So kind of the first area, bent 1 through bent 6, you see there's basalt. You could provide foundational supports. Where the 8th Street dock is, you might have to have a little bit of a bridge span. And then you'll have to find a way to kind of slip through the arch bridge. And then what you'll notice about bent 11, 12, and 13, and 14, and even into 15, there's no place to put any support structures because it goes down potentially to 100, 120 feet. And so you're would have to also span that area without any support structures. And so pretty quickly it was seen that really the only option that met the community's need but was also constructible and permittable would have some kind of long span, which really only had two support structures, one at the north and one at the south, and then led the kind of superstructure, the path kind of needle through the arch bridge support towers. And this is a kind of conceptual view of the long span looking from the Willamette, or from the Westland side over. You kind of see it lines up. The lowest part is right underneath the arch bridge, and then it pulls up a little to either side of the support post. You'll see on the left there is a little bit of opportunities for some additional secondary support posts as we get closer to 10th Street, but really that span where the Willamette River is really deep is where we can't put any support. And so The design team came to the city commission in spring and said, this is what we think is the best option. Do you want to move forward to do some further conceptual studies this spring and summer to see, to confirm that it's permittable? Or do you want to move forward with the no-build option? And so the commission gave direction to the design team to continue to work with ODOT, finish up the conceptual study, and said, well, could this be permitted? But could this be permitted at a future design process? And so they've been working on that all this spring and summer, and it can be. We've learned a lot. We've talked to ODOT. The big thing that ODOT wants is a 30-foot separation between the viaduct and the structure because they have maintenance boom trucks that need to get up and over, so that was a big design criteria. And while the federal permitting process is very detailed and very specific, and we are not there yet, our consultant teams work with the NEPA process a lot, and so they were just pushing to see what the fatal flaws. We have ODOT's main tribal contact working with all 5 tribes that are interested in this area of the Willamette River, making sure they're coordinated with their comments. And so we've been kind of working through this spring and summer. And so I think we're at a place where we think that the long span as a concept can be permittable. And if the commission move forward, then and adopt it into our transportation system plan, we could apply for future design grants to kind of further the design process. Not construct, but a future grant would just continue the design process to a place where we could have better better budgets, taking the, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. That's okay.
I think you're trying to winnow it down so you get more specifics from this broad concept into something more constructive.
So there's a lot of built-in costs because we end of the unknowns, and so you do more design to get that unknowns to be better known. So I'm going to hand this over to Dana. She has a couple slides that talks a little bit about the long span, and then we're going to talk a little bit about our conversations with ODOT and how we can provide better pedestrian amenities on 99, and the 2 options of both keeping parking and removing parking, and how we can approve both and decide later, which is always a good option. So I'm going to hand this over to Dana.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the chosen alternative along 99E as the long span. And so I'm just going to explain a little bit about the advantages to this option, as well as some of the challenges. So this option has advantages of those minimized foundations. So as Christina showed you, minimal work within the riverbed. So trying to stay above that high water mark always mitigates your risk of a project. So you have a better cost estimate as you go into things. Additionally, this long span option allows a lighter and a smaller superstructure, so that surface that you walk on can also be minimized. The foundations are further away from the arch bridge, so anytime we can keep as much of the work away from the arch bridge, and again, with just 2 main foundations, it's less excavation. And again, in this culturally rich area, we want to minimize our impacts to the existing ground whenever possible. This option also minimizes our traffic disruptions along 99E during a construction phase, and allows us to utilize prefabricated elements. And then really taking this opportunity to kind of have a contemporary solution intentionally different than the existing arch bridge. So not trying to compete with the arch bridge, but to kind of essentially, as you saw with that long span, it almost kind of frames it, especially from the West Lynn side, with the arch bridge right in the center of the long span and the existing municipal elevator and the location of Mount Hood in the background. It really starts to kind of create even a more interesting kind of photography option of Oregon City. So some of the challenges with this option would be that that design of getting that long span through the arch bridge. The bridge engineers are confident they can do it. It's just a little more of a challenge than if they didn't have to do that. And then those two towers do have a little bit larger foundations. And again, a project like this, adjacent, you know, usually a bridge spans a river, not kind of running adjacent to it in parallel. So this is a little bit different and would, you know, likely need, you know, more specialized contractor. So if we got to a point for construction, we might look at a different option than a low bid, possibly a design build or a CMGC type of contract, construction management general contractor, where you bring them on board during design to limit your risk. Clicker is not working for me. There we go. Okay. So other things that we looked at as part of our alternatives analysis was the option for placemaking and activating our riverfront. And so, as Christina mentioned, we took a handful of options to the City Commission, and at this point, the plan is to kind of leave all of them in the plan for now. The City Commission didn't feel like there was any fatal flaws with the options, and so when we get to a point for that refinement of the corridor, then we would look at those options in detail. So those options include this concept of a little bit of a linear park, and I think it shows a little more in another slide as well, but also an option to activate the area under the arch bridge. So today, I believe there are 6 parking spots that are permit parking spots under the arch bridge. And so then this is an option to look at, you know, do we maintain that parking or not? Could it be created into more of a festival type of a street or an area when Main Street has an event, it could be an extension of that event and allow, you know, more booth space during an event. So looking at options, we could look at landscaping, benches, picnic tables, even bike parking, or a community space that could be programmed with activities. Other things that we could look at is streetscape options. Those could include bulb outs, landmarks, lighting along the corridor, wayfinding signage, materials, landscaping. The project could include some boardwalk like Phase 1 has. So right now there's a little bit of a boardwalk area, often referred to as the Willamette Terrace. We could look at some of that, and art or interpretive signage. So there's many options for this project. We haven't kind of made any of those final decisions, but we're kind of putting it all on the table, and when we get to a future refinement phase, we would look at how we can include those kind of items in the corridor. So this area is a kind of zoomed in section of 9090 at Main Street and then Railroad. So there at the bottom of the photo is you're coming out of the tunnel 9090 northbound. And so today you make a pretty tight right-hand turn, and that movement for vehicles really does not give you visibility for pedestrians coming out of the pedestrian tunnel. And so this concept pulls that right turn movement a little bit further toward the river, north-ish, and then really lets the vehicles and the pedestrian have a line of sight of each other before that car is making that movement. So really looking at pedestrian safety. This movement also would allow vehicles to make this right turn and loop around and access the future Tumwater Village site as well, instead of making a left onto Main Street into the site. So kind of taking, I believe that was a condition of approval of the master plan for the Tumwater Village site. So looking at that with this, We'd also look at the 9090 and Main Street intersection and look to include those bulb outs to shorten pedestrian crossing distances whenever possible. So this is a concept level. We haven't kind of refined that, but the idea would be to put those bulb outs in as many locations as possible to shorten that pedestrian crossing. Next slide. So this slide really looks at kind of what we refer to as the elbow at 9090. So on the left side is the Tumwata Village site. And then as you can see, there's two options here. The building is actually right at the right-of-way line, so that parking area below kind of 9090 on the screen is actually right-of-way. And so looking at options moving forward of how do we best use that? Is it looking at kind of addressing the access to that parking? So right now there is no curb or sidewalk, and it's just a completely long, open, essentially driveway for those parking spots. And an option to make it safer for pedestrians would be to kind of localize and funnel those vehicles into those two driveways shown. Another option is to turn this essentially into a green space. This could be kind of a small landscaped area as well. And again, you'll see 6th Street gets narrowed down, shortening those pedestrian crossing distances whenever possible. Next slide. So on this slide, you'll see, it's a little hard to see, so we've removed the arch bridge overpass from this image. So what you see on the top one is essentially how it acts today with that pedestrian activated traffic signal under the arch bridge for pedestrians to cross. It crosses over and aligns up really where those parking spots are, directly under the structure. And so you can see that on the top image. On the bottom image, we realign that and we use that alleyway that would connect to Main Street and kind of realign that from a pedestrian perspective. And that's one option that we could look at. In that option on the bottom of the slide, it does limit the ability to get into those 6 parking spots down there to some degree. And so, again, we would continue those conversations when we get to that next refinement stage. Going back to the top slide, that red rectangle is the existing utility tower, which will stay. And so there's an option to maintain the parking, but instead of having essentially kind of a drive aisle and then the parking, we would pull that parking to be lane adjacent, so parallel parking adjacent to the lane, and that would give us the opportunity to get some landscaping and green space in the corridor. In the other option on the bottom, it would turn it entirely into an open space or a green space, and the commission, had concerns, I think, with removing the entire amount of parking, but in the event we don't find funding for 10 or 15 years, we might have a different parking situation downtown, and so we do want to keep options in the plan. Next slide.
Thanks. Actually, I do want to, the one thing that this plan, the streetscape doesn't indicate as well, and we'll do the final version, which we just got off the printer and will be as part of your packet. There is an intention to have, a connection to the long span path at the Arch Bridge. So the idea you'd be walking from Main Street down that alley corridor, across the street, and you could get access to the long span as that's kind of, that would be that continuous pedestrian connection. There is another option they're looking at about providing an underpassing, where basically, if you think of where the steps are now at the 8th Street dock, if you are where the Clackamas County Courthouse is now, and if you take those steps down, imagine, if you will, a version that's an at-grade ADA ramp that takes you kind of underneath and then back up. But your ADA ramps are a lot longer than stairs, so it really is engineers be working on how best to connect those spots, but you be able to walk through an ADA ramp under undergrade passing. Right now, we really only have Main Street, 7th Street, and 10th Street as our three areas, and those are much, much longer than our recommended connections in a kind of an urban core. So we're trying to provide one more option for a pedestrian crossing if our goal is to provide this integrated, access from downtown to the river. Where we are today, we do still have a project website, so there is a link up there. You can always access it on our Public Works page and on the planning page. If you go to the Oregon City website, find the planning department. On the bottom left-hand side of the planning page, you'll see a McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancements link. You can always go to the website and sign up for updates. I generally send project updates as they occur. And as we are moving forward to the legislative file, I'll be sending all the folks that are on that project list, which is about 250, 300 people now. They'll get noticed that we're moving forward, and you can follow the legislative process through that sign up as well. We are also providing updates to our other boards and commissions to, bring them into kind of what has been happening over the last 3, 4, 5 months, as well as, our commissions and boards have expertise in the area. We spent last week talking to the Transportation Advisory Commission. We're going to the National Resource Commission and PRAC. They're having, our Parks and Rec Advisory Committee are having a joint meeting in October, and I know we're working to bring one of our natural resource specialists from our consultant team to kind of talk through a future permitting process along the shoreline, since this is a conceptual plan, so those get really detailed, but kind of talking through what would that look like, what's the habitat restoration goals, what are the requirements and the mitigation. So we'll be getting into the kind of the natural resource weeds a little bit, so if you're interested in that piece, you can log in and watch the video either live or on our website after the October 7th, the second Wednesday of October. It'll be a joint Parks and Rec. So we'll be doing that. We're heading back out to talk to our downtown folks. We're meeting with DOCA to once again work with our downtown property owners to make sure that they're up to speed and that there's not anything we're missing that's critical path information. As well as working with the Citizen Involvement Committee. We'll be going in October 7th. At their meeting. So we're kind of finishing up and kind of doing that touchback to all of our groups. And right now it looks like we'll be coming to you as a legislative file on October 28th. And I'm going to give it back to Dana real quickly to talk a little bit about the grant process. And this is kind of why we are moving this towards the legislative process, because there are grant deadlines coming, and what does that mean, and how we are thinking of approaching it in a bit of a two-stepped grant application.
All right, so as I mentioned, this work was funded by the Regional Flexible Funds program at Metro. And this year, Metro has initiated a new funding program that they refer to as the Step 1 Bond Program. And so the City Commission has provided a resolution of support, and the project has been nominated for that Step 1 Bond Program, which would include the streetscape improvements, not the long span piece, and that would be for design and construction. So over the next 3 to 4 months, we'll learn more about how that, how the project nomination is kind of working through that process. Additionally, we'll intend to apply for the Metro's Step 2 process for the streetscape improvements for just the additional project development. So the Step 1 Bond Program has a minimum project cost of $9 million. And so we did submit for a $9 million construction, design and construction program. The Step 2 has a lower threshold, and so in that program, we would be nominating just additional project refinement. And so that has not gone to City Commission for a resolution of support, but that smaller project likely would come to other committees as well for a resolution of support. The bond program was a pretty quick turnaround, and so had a little bit less coordination with some of the committees than we would have liked, just because of the timing.
One thing before we kind of go to questions by the Planning Commission, you know, the long span is pretty ambitious. I don't think anyone would disagree with someone who said that. But I think knowing that we either had this kind of more ambitious concept or the complete no-build option, you know, I think both the people in the community and the city commission, you know, you can't build what you don't adopt. I think I always say that once every month, but you can't build what you don't adopt. And so if this is something that we see as a potential long-term solution for this area, if this is something that really meets our goals, you have to adopt it first. And that's really what's coming to you on October 28th. And as we go through different grants, it's going to be further design refinements. And then at some point, the city commission, the community can decide, no, we want to go for it. We want to build it. How do we work with our partners? How do we, you know, be more collaborative? But we're still at 0.05 in our process. So adopting it will allow us to really further the conversation, but we can't do that unless we adopt it.
All right, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Go ahead, Dirk.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is a question for Christina or for Dina, Ms. Webb or Ms. Gardner. Can we go back a couple slides to the elbow? I have a question about the right-of-way.
That one.
Yes. Okay. I noticed as part of the transmission shops, parking, I know they have a parking permit for that area. You said it was a right-of-way. But I imagine that the ODOT right-of-way is more the shape of the road. So is that a city right-of-way, or what exactly is that right-of-way where the parking is?
So
to the west of the building.
Sure. Do you see the property line of the auto body shop?
Yes.
Okay. So that open area is city parking right now, but it is, you know, ill-defined, and you know, there's no pedestrian opportunities, and that's kind of the idea is to, how do you make this a safer turn, both for vehicles to slow down, for pedestrians to be able to feel safe. So when you do that, now you're going to have to create a driveway approach, a driveway system. So that's what has been designed as a system of driveways.
But you can see from the picture of that van that's parked there, that vehicle would be stuck if there was a sidewalk there.
So we're at conceptual level, but this is basically within that area, there would be a redesigning of the parking. So at this big picture conceptual level, it is, do we want to find ways to keep parking within a driveway format, or do we want to have a version that is landscaping? And so what this plan does is says both are options that we can pursue at the next phase if we move forward, and we can have those conversations, knowing that, you know, if we move forward with this grant project for design and construction, it may be a couple years before we start that project. So we may be having this conversation in 2027 or 2028 with folks. So it's almost like at that year, we can see, okay, now what do we want to do? Do we want to look at what does it really look like? How does it really lay out for cars? And how does it really lay out for landscaping? And what do we want to do? So with adopting both, is we really can keep both concepts moving forward, and before, we don't have to choose one now at a conceptual level.
Okay, but if once this is adopted, it's one of those.
Well, it's either...
Are we tied into both those two options, or are there other options? Like we don't touch
There's always a hybrid in the middle. So the reality is, if you adopt we want to keep parking option, and we want to turn into landscape option, and then we get a grant and a design team is hired to actually do the construction drawings, then you go out and say, well, actually, here's a hybrid option. And sometimes the community likes the hybrid option, but because we're at a conceptual level, it takes a lot of time, energy, and money to dive down to the details to get to that level of detail where you could really make that informed choice. So we're backing up to that 10,000 feet, so we don't have to make that informed choice now, because we don't have all the information we need to do that.
Right. Now, impact to the business owner.
Right. And so he has a lease right now with ODOT, so it may be at the year we have that there's at least considerations that we need. It could be that we don't get this grant and it's 2031 that we have this conversation. It's the next grant cycle. So as always, you look at a concept plan, it's what does this community want? What's our big vision? And how do we ensure that we have the information we need to make the informed decisions when that level of detail is needed?
Okay. All right. I know the business owner's here. I think you have a compact. Yeah, he's probably got things to say. I don't know if I want to say more after he's done. But I mean, those are my concerns. I know there's impacts to a business if they, can no longer park a commercial vehicle in front of their own business. So I don't know if the city, considers those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it could negatively impact their business. It could affect their ability to function.
Yeah, as we get to the design process, that's the decision of, the city commission and the community when we'll be going through another design phase and another public outreach, whatever year we get the grant.
Okay, I'm done for now.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Laws.
So a few things here. Number one is obviously the design itself. Right now we're seeing pictures of the design having two large, gathering points to take the weight of the bridge. Is there any way to possibly make those consider shorter so they don't take away the look of the bridge? Is there any possibility there?
So I'm not a design engineer, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hearing from our not only our engineering team, but, the specially bridge design team that came in, is they looked at the design needed to hold the weight. So, they really saw what the conceptual design is, barring the smaller details. That's the size of the structure that's needed to support.
Okay. And then the other thing there is, we're seeing something new on the river in a historic town. So are we looking at possibly identifying what's in the river as an opportunity for tourism? Also, in terms of history, because there's a lot of rich history, is having points of signs on the bridge with identification of significant parts of the river and what was there or what's in the river. Yeah, because that could promote tourism.
Absolutely, and if you look on page 1 of the PDF that was attached, because we're at a conceptual level, you see kind of a list of design intents, and one of them is at this conceptual level, we're looking at entrance art, gateway art, as well as interpretive art elements along the corridor, and that's once again. You put that in because this is the conceptual level, but you bake those things into your plan. So we want to see interpretive elements throughout the corridor, and then you have that in the conceptual plan, and then let's say we got the grant, that's when you design it. But you bake the intent into the plan you adopt.
And two other things here real quick. The River Shore, technically there's River Shore Park, and it looks like the bridge is going to go right next to it. Is there any type of idea of possibly that little space doing something kind of creative there as well? Because technically where it kind of bends across from the auto body is technically River Shore Park, historically.
Oh, you mean are you talking about the elbow or down?
That little elbow, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me go.
It did, I guess. I've been told.
Let me go here. Yeah, here. So you'll see right now there is a hashed out area. Mm-hmm. So the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde received funding a couple years ago to move forward to construct Water, 4th, and Main Street on their site, and that actually will be coming to you as a land use application this winter. And you'll notice that at the conceptual level, it is undefined right now because we would need that level of detail. But one thing I've actually mentioned to Dana is in the final version, I definitely do want to have like an asterisk, because if we're not at a level here, but there is space in that you mentioned, that is another opportunity for potentially interpretive space, gathering space, but we don't have that level of detail until we get, until the Confederate Tribes have a better final design of their water street. But there absolutely is a space right there. And so in lieu of the information we would have if we were farther down the road, at this conceptual level, we can put notes and asterisks, like this area is another opportunity. So that is one thing that I definitely want to see as we move forward to the final version of the plan you'll see.
And the last thing I was going to bring up here real quick is obviously downtown itself, it's in a transition. We're getting a lot of homeless more so. We are getting from Portland. There's been more activity with businesses to where there's been a lot more stress on the businesses. Obviously, we're looking long-term, so this may not be an issue, but, long-term about security for the bridge, because obviously we're looking at the promenade with more activity now. Downtown with more activity is obviously I'd like to see some type of security there long-term, just as a mention. It's obviously too early for that, but I just wanted to mention it. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and that's, you always want to put the right notes at the right level, but even putting a line item or asterisk as we're looking at, how do you, build in security, how do we allude to that in our plan? So, because what's nice when you have that in a concept plan, it suddenly gets built into the scope of work. So you're just helping to kind of create the future scope of work.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner LaSalle.
Is this in addition to the transportation system plan?
This would be added. So the McLoughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan is already adopted, and the transportation system plan, it was adopted about 20 years ago. So this would be kind of a refinement sub-plan of that into the TSP.
Would this be categorized as likely or not likely to be funded?
Sure, I'm going to hand that to the Public Works Director.
And I think for now, we would probably just stick it in the TSP. I think we have hopes of identifying funding to kind of relook at the transportation system plan. I mean, in theory, we've used up our available funds for likely to be funded projects with our current TSP, so we'd have to kind of reopen that to look at that. Although what I will say is just because it says not likely to be funded, if a grant opportunity comes along and we're able to, provide a 10% match and get a $9 million project out of it, then we've historically gone after even those projects identified as not likely to be funded.
And my last question is, are you now collecting or soon will be collecting SDCs for this project?
So the project is currently in the TSP, and so it is part of that transportation SDC calculation. This is really kind of refining it, and I haven't taken a look at the project. It is in the likely to be funded. It's in the RTP, so we've actually identified it as an RTP project, knowing we would go after, yes, RTP is Regional Transportation Plan. So each city has a local plan, and then we all combine those together for the entire metro region. And so we have identified this as an RTP project, meaning it would be likely to be funded. I haven't taken a look at the original cost estimate versus this revised one.
And so I think the one extra piece that you'll see in front of you on October 28th is a version of this document, which is kind of the final plan version, which has background narrative, as well as a one-line box, which is the refinement of the transportation system plan project that's already in the TSP, probably with a refined cost estimate. It's not going to change that's not going to change the STC calculation, but at least will provide a revised cost estimate in the kind of line item of projects.
That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Hey, could I ask one question?
Please do.
All right. Christina, Dana, thank you for your time tonight. In the elbow, in regards to pedestrian traffic or flow, were there any considerations in just having pedestrian traffic on one of the north or south sides of 99?
There was, but you can't get bikes. Because there's not enough space in certain areas. That part of 99E has constrained areas, and so you definitely couldn't have any future bike options on 99E. You would definitely have to send them. And even in some of the areas, it would be really small. I mean, you would have definitely some shorter areas that were not, they still could be sidewalks. The city commission looked at that option, and it was almost as close as a no-build option.
Understood. Thank you.
But that's a great question.
I don't know what slide it was on your presentation, but it was in 21A in our packet. But the traffic clips along pretty quick there on 99, and I was wondering, how would you ever be able to remove that little curb there and have people parallel park in traffic going, 30 to 40 miles an hour there? So I would say that area would look like, to me, between the bridge and 8th Street. Maybe it was to 7th, where you had that parking. Right now, there's a little curb, and everybody pulls in behind the curb, but how would you ever get parallel parking in there at that speed?
So on the city side of?
No, on the riverside.
Riverside.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I'll let Dana speak, but, we do have parking as we get to 11th and 12th Street on McLoughlin Boulevard, by Active Water Sports. And so we work with the ODOT folks, and they've kind of provided the logistics and the geometry of, if you did do parking, this is how you would do it that met the ODOT minimum requirements. So I think that's kind of our goal really is, it's an ODOT facility. We have some ability, in design toolbox, but at some point, if we want parking and we're going to rebuild it, this is what would meet the ODOT technical specs for, an urban parallel parking. And then the other one was what happens if we remove the parking. And so that's why we pursued looking at both options, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
This one's a lot quicker, I promise. The sidewalks, are those in the ODOT right away, or are those in the city right away?
I didn't quite hear you. What was the question?
The sidewalks, are they in the ODOT right away? The ones on the east side, is that the east side? Yeah. The sidewalks we got drawn in there, is that a city right away? ODOT?
So all of the right-of-way down 9090 is an ODOT right-of-way.
That's all ODOT. So if we build in there, we have to build to ODOT standards?
Yes. I mean, they've adopted blueprint for urban design, which allows a little more flexibility with the improvements on an ODOT roadway. But yes, we would be working through ODOT and getting a permit from ODOT to build the infrastructure, just as we have in the previous two phases.
Okay, and then I'm not seeing a bike lane, so would the bikes be in the road, or would they be on the sidewalk?
In this scenario, the bikes are in the shared use path on that long span.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I do have a comment card for this item. Anyone have any objection to hearing a comment? Okay. I'll call up Larry Morton.
My name's Larry Morton. I own Larry Morton's Transmission Service in downtown Oregon City, have for 46 years. I'm in the process of retiring. I intend on going to be giving my business to one of my long-term employees so that he can keep going for a couple more generations. Unfortunately, this plan, at least the part that affects me, figure 20A, he might survive 6 months in business. 20B, he'll be out in 2 weeks. So that's pretty frustrating after spending my whole life down there. Some of the design issues involved, the access, getting in and out. 20B is just virtually impossible to operate. Virtually impossible. Shuts down half my shop, makes it almost virtually impossible to get to my office parking. I have no clue how they'll get in and out of there. Maybe they'll fly. But if they fly, they don't need their car fixed. 20A will make it to where you could pull into the office, but somehow you got to back and turn around to get back out again. That cuts it down to maybe 3 cars being able to be in there instead of 6 or 8 the way it is right now. I'm not sure people understand on this curve, when a semi comes around the corner, the back tires on the semi track 2 to 3 feet in. You can ask my tool truck. They've been hit several times, parked 3 feet off the road as the semi comes around the corner. You're wanting to put an extended curb out there. That's going to be really cool to keep YouTube videos going as the semis flip over onto the oncoming traffic when they come around there and the back tires catch and flip up. So be kind of exciting. Be ready for lots of lawsuits. This is pretty frustrating. I spent my whole life building my business. I own the buildings, and yes, I could lease them to somebody else. If I get kicked out of it with the shop that way, I'm going to pick a company that's going to irritate the city the worst I possibly can, because it's not the way I want to go out. I should have the right to make my decision and leave. I've worked all those years to buy that property. I just don't understand what's going to be accomplished out of this. Some of the other areas on the other side, even though I don't agree with a lot of it, I guess it'll get by. You're not going to be able to have parallel parking along McLoughlin with it narrowed right up against it. It's just not safe. It won't work. Truthfully, I should get 3 minutes since I own 3 properties, but what the heck.
All right.
All right. I'd love to talk. Okay. I will warn you, this room's got some of the worst acoustics of any room I've ever been in. You honestly should consider having a screen there so when you talk, it gets converted to words. Because I haven't understood one word anybody said in here so far. So, not cool. Oh.
All right, we've had one more comment card on this particular topic, so we'll call up Paul Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Paul Edgar, Oregon City. I have a great concern with this project. Okay, I'll talk right close to it. I have a great concern with this project. I was on the Urban Renewal Commission when we did a lot of the early projects. And what I see right now is a project that will entice people to go over to this river walk. But how do we get the people to the river walk and have them crossing McLoughlin in a high-speed world and with lots of traffic and incidents of travel growing rapidly, increasing and more. So every time somebody hits a crosswalk light, we slow up the flow of traffic, not only through the city, but can be everywhere, and it backs up. It is foreseeable that we could have traffic come to a dead stop when we have high incidence of people coming into Oregon City to get out and see this, or go on to the Riverwalk, or go to Watauga Village. Let's say we have 1,000 people come into Oregon City, and we have how many times do they hit the crosswalk light? And when they hit the crosswalk light, wherever it is, traffic stops. And then they go in, hit the crosswalk light, and then they go out. Under those conditions, we could turn around and see 99E McLoughlin coming to a dead stop all day long. I live in Kanema. I wouldn't even be able to get to Kanema. I would try to figure out, how do I get up onto the hillside? This is a potential for great, it's going to be, could be chaos. My suggestion is that we need to come up with a plan that potentially has a bridge that bridges across, and I would love to, and I made a recommendation the other night where we use the 7th Street alleyway south of the bridge and create a ramp that goes up over the Highway 99 right there, create a nice view platform, ADA accessible, where people could go right up, look right down into the falls, right into everything, and then either ramp down or a little elevator, whatever it is, staircase. But this could be the way people from Main Street get onto that side of the river, on that side of McLoughlin, without having to put a stoplight there. This is critical. And if we don't, I did timings on it, and I was alarmed when I started figuring out what the queue would be, and it could bring traffic to a dead stop. So I hope you figure it out. I think it needs to have some real solutions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or questions from the commission? You need to submit a card. Sure. Yes.
Sorry, I guess I didn't look at the schedule. Tom Guile, Oregon City, I didn't look at the schedule, didn't realize this was going to be before Park Place. We're already losing people. But when I was on the Planning Commission and we discussed the whole plan down there, I was the one who put it into motion to adopt the plan that we were at the time looking at. And one of the things that we had discussed is, because I have a business on Main Street, is to have an overpass there on Main Street that went into there. We know that if we want to keep business flowing between our businesses on Main Street current and the new one, we needed something that didn't misdirect them off Main Street, but came over Main Street over there. And just what Paul said, but I'm not sure where he was talking about. But we realize that traffic backs up there. When I leave my business at 5 o'clock and I come around through to get onto Highway 99, it is backed up sometimes all the way past 10th, all the way back down to the Oregon City Shopping Center. It gets really tied up there in that corner. But if you want to help those citizens and we want this plan to go through, having an overpass there was what we talked about on the Planning Commission almost 8 years ago as a way to get people moving back and forth between the new village and the downtown Main Street. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anything else you want to add?
I think for Mr. Morton, it is definitely something we want to have a continuing conversation. I think the goal is at this conceptual plan is not to make any big design decisions. So if there needs to be a couple more things added, and notes added into the plan that will help, inform future decisions, then we absolutely need to do that.
Okay. And I'll just remind everybody that this will be a legislative process in a month, give or take. So we'll have more hearings. Thank you. All right, move on to the Park Place Concept Plan Code Amendments. That's what everyone's waiting for. I have a script to read, so I'm going to get started on that. A public hearing on a legislative application is scheduled for tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable laws and codes and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Legislative actions involve the adoption or amendment of the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, maps, inventories, and other public policy documents that affect the entire city or large portions of it. Legislative actions which affect land use shall begin with a public hearing before the Planning Commission. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. Upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission on a legislative action, the City Commission shall hold at least one public hearing on the proposal. Any interested person may provide written or oral testimony on the proposal at or prior to the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, the City Commission may adopt, modify, or reject the legislative proposal, or it may remand the matter to the Planning Commission for further consideration. If the decision is to adopt at least some form of the proposal and thereby amend the city's land use regulations, comprehensive plan, official zoning maps, or some component of any of these documents, the City Commission decision shall be enacted as an ordinance. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested in advance of the meeting. If you have not emailed city staff at planning@orcity.org, To request to speak and would like to testify, please raise your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies may be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony, or to keep the record open, or respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. At this point, I'm going to ask the commissioners if there's any conflict of interest. We don't have to discuss bias or ex parte contact, just conflict of interest. And I'll start with Commissioner Laws.
I don't have any conflict of interest.
I don't have any conflict of interest.
I have no conflicts of interest. No, I'm sorry. I have no conflicts of interest.
Yeah, no conflicts of interest.
I have no conflict of interest or bias.
Okay, and I also have no conflict of interest. We'll start off with the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Pete Walter, Planning Manager, and I will be presenting the Legislative File 2401, which is Park Place Concept Plan Code Amendments. Just get the presentation up and we can kick it off. Thank you, Kay. We ready to go? Okay. Tonight, I'll be providing an overview of the legislative process to adopt code amendments for the Park Place Concept Plan. And along with that, we'll have a look back to the various meetings and work sessions we've held to date. Then we'll be providing some background on why this project is needed and some of the impetus for it, including state housing laws. Then we're going to be providing a mostly general overview of code that has already been discussed by the Planning Commission, but I'll also be providing more detailed explanations for newer code revisions that have been drafted since staff presented the code to the City Commission at their work session on August 13th. So tonight, this is a legislative hearing. It's the first evidentiary public hearing for adoption of these code amendments. Following the Planning Commission's recommendation to the City Commission, there will be a City Commission hearing. The dates for that will be determined following your recommendation. The final code amendments will be adopted by ordinance, and public testimony may be given anytime up until the close of the final City Commission public hearing. So you can send written public comments to me through the concept plan website, and there's contact information for that. Most of the folks here probably heard of this hearing through either a card that you were postcard mailed or a paper mailing. You may have also heard of it through attending the prior meetings that we've had already. So the Park Place Concept Plan was adopted in 2008. At that time, we amended the municipal code to implement the concept plan. But since that time, land use regulations in the state of Oregon have changed, and the city reviewed its first land use application in the concept plan area. That review illuminated some of the areas in code that we need to refine 16 years after the initial adoption. We've had a series of meetings with the Planning Commission. to work towards the draft amendments that are in the packet this evening, and those began in May. We also met with the City Commission twice in work session, and we presented to the Citizen Involvement Committee and to the Park Place Neighborhood Association. Next, I'll provide a little more detail on the concept plan itself. In 2002, nearly 500 acres of rural land located east of Oregon City was brought into the Portland Metro urban growth boundary to accommodate future urban growth. The Park Place concept plan was developed to help the City of Oregon City prepare for this growth by working with local citizens, area stakeholders, and local jurisdictions to develop a common vision for the area. The vision provides a framework for growth that respects and augments the area's context, history, and natural systems. The Park Place concept plan emphasizes good urban design, multimodal connectivity, opportunities for placemaking and cultivating community, diversity, and above all, a way to provide for future growth in a sustainable manner. Ultimately, the Park Place concept plan will ensure that the land brought into the city is planned in an efficient and sustainable way that will maximize the use of available urban land while protecting the natural resources in the study area. Some of the components of the plan, and probably one of the most important, are the transportation projects in the plan, and those include the extensions of Holly Lane and Swan Avenue. Holly Lane was adopted into the 2013 Oregon City Transportation System Plan and is a planned collector roadway. And the that TSP project is Project D48, and it would connect Redland Road to Holcomb Boulevard. It is known as the Holly Lane North Extension and described as a residential minor arterial. And the funding priority for that in the transportation system plan is long-term. The other roadway is known as the Swan Avenue extension, which would come later in the project. That is Project D49 and D50. It's also described as long-term and is a residential collector street. The long-term projects are those that are likely to be implemented beyond 10 years from the adoption of the transportation system plan. And these projects are really important for the development of the transportation network, but unlikely to be funded in 10 years. Development can pay for a portion of these extensions when there is a rational nexus that exists and rough proportionality to the impact of development. We have a public improvement code that specifies how these developments will provide street connections proportional to their impact. And the Planning Commission has recommended that we reprioritize these projects from long-term to short-term in the next transportation system plan update. There's also been discussion about participating in the county's transportation system plan in order to have these projects reflected in their plan, and how to pay for the projects as well, including zones of benefits, local improvement districts, grant funding, and various other ways to fund it, as well as updating the city-county urban growth management area agreement as a tool for how to plan and fund roads at the edges of the urban-rural interface. Housing is a really important aspect of this plan. Since 2008, the land use paradigm in Oregon has shifted and multiple new regulations apply for housing. For example, House Bill 2001, the middle housing mandates were adopted by the city in 2022 to allow duplex, triplex, quadplex, townhome, and cottage clusters on lots in single-family zones. In 2017, Senate Bill 1051 changed the application of clear and objective standards to apply to all housing development and not what was formerly known as needed housing. All housing is needed housing now. Discretionary standards are no longer applicable to any housing development regardless of the classification of needed housing. And needed housing means housing by an affordability level prescribed in statutes, and necessary to accommodate the city's allocated housing need over a 20-year planning period. Most recently, in 2024, Senate Bill 1537 requires that jurisdictions also grant mandatory adjustments to their development code if a development meets certain thresholds. We'll also be talking through new proposed code standards for proportional dedication of parks and trails to achieve the needed parkland in the Park Place concept plan. And that includes an 8 to 10 acre community park in the North Village area and a 3 to 5 acre neighborhood park in the South Village area, as well as off-street trails. The area that is currently along Livesey Road and also near Donovan Road, south of Redland Road, eventually is envisioned to be a small-scale neighborhood commercial zone. As proposed in the existing code, this allows the same kind of land uses as our mixed-use corridor zone, but at a smaller scale, with smaller building footprints and lower height limits. And has, as proposed, there will be a more limited set of uses for the neighborhood commercial zone. Also, in that zone previously, there was a 50% cap on residential use. And as proposed, after discussion with the Planning Commission and the City Commission, we're moving towards not allowing any residential use in the neighborhood commercial zone on the ground floor within 100 feet of Livesey Road. And I'll talk more about that on a subsequent slide. Stormwater management in the Park Place concept plan is talked about as a tiered level of management. The first level would be on-site retention to try to infiltrate your stormwater on-site using a best management practice known as LID, or low impact development, and that includes rain gardens, swales, and other infiltration designs. The second level is on-site stormwater management, but a little larger scale. It could include detention on-site. Level 3 is your larger facilities that drain water off-site to a larger detention or retention facility. And then level 4 is a fee in lieu of that. And so these concepts for stormwater management have been adopted into the city's stormwater grading and design manual and our stormwater standards in chapter 13.12. And they are trying to mimic the natural hydrology of the area while managing new urban impervious surface areas. As far as the neighborhood commercial zone market, staff hired Johnson Economics to evaluate expected development of these neighborhood commercial designated parcels within the Park Place concept plan. This report included a site analysis, a look at the regional market area, demographics, and also the impact of design standards. Some of the outcomes from that report are summarized here. There would be roughly 1,800 households in the primary market area that this area ultimately serves. Currently, retail vacancies are rising sharply with a weaker demand for retail space. Residential density and buying power in the area is somewhat limited. Much of the retail demand is already met by supply outside of this area by larger shopping facilities. The Holly Lane Redland Road connection is absolutely necessary for viable commercial use, both for transportations, vehicle connections, and visibility. Larger retailers generally prefer a more central location for convenient cross-shopping, and smaller scale retail services could be supported in the neighborhood commercial zone if residential development happens first. And this outlook could change with increased development, both locally and regional. As far as the economic impact of design standards, most of the city's adopted commercial design standards are not proposed to change markedly with respect to things like building orientation and parking, site setbacks, prohibitions on drive-through and gas station prohibitions, minimum building heights, and parking locations. However, Johnson Economics comments on the NC zone, neighborhood commercial zone, indicate that some of these design standards may be more challenging to meet on smaller, shallower parcels. The NC zone along Livesey Main Street is shown on our maps as approximately 200 feet deep, which provides some room for design. Other neighborhood commercial considerations are that the plan envisions mixed-use neighborhoods with commercial zones that integrate commercial land, residential, and public open space along Livesey Main Street. Potential uses could be coffee shops, bookstores, dry cleaners, and cafes, as well as civic uses. And the outcome of the assessment is that the site will need a substantive amount of the planned residential development to be completed, as well as the Holly Lane connection between Holcomb and Redland Road before commercial development is viewed as viable. So now I'm going to start transitioning into what the actual code amendments are that we're talking about. We started this code revision process by reviewing 11 key elements in the concept plan and comparing those against the zoning code. We drafted an implementation memorandum which describes which of those elements have been codified and where revisions are needed to further implement them with clear and objective standards. The proposed code revisions were drafted within that paradigm of clear and objective standards. Through this work, we identified 7 chapters for revisions and 1 potential update to the transportation system plan to incorporate the adopted trails and multimodal connectivity. So let's go over these amendments. And as I said, the items that the Planning Commission has already reviewed, I'm going to give a more general overview for, but if there is additional revision based on input from the City Commission, I'll be providing a little more detail and showing you that red line code, which is in your packet already. First item that we're talking about will be the street design section of our public improvements, chapter 1612, alleys. This revision creates a new clear and objective standard that offers a modification to the requirement for alleys when the development project is within a sensitive natural resource overlay district, a geologic hazard overlay district, or in the transition zone. The public alley access may not be feasible nor practicable in these areas due to the additional grading, cut and fill, and impervious surfaces that alleys require, and the need to minimize disturbance to natural resources and steeply sloped or unstable sites. A third modification was added to exclude development that abuts the Park Place concept plan boundaries from the alley service requirement, since including an alley at the rear of those abutting lots would defeat the purpose of having a green buffer concept and a separation between existing residential development and new residential development within the concept plan area, as well as to meet the requirement for blocks with 2 tiers of lots that abut one another, like a typical block system. Through a Type 2 process, an applicant may request modification of this standard as part of their application for land division or other land use application. Additionally, several new definitions were needed in the code to clearly define various design and architectural features and options in the in the neighborhood commercial areas. Next, we have the chapter for low-density residential districts. That's chapter 17.08. This includes revisions for new setbacks between existing dwelling units outside the concept plan area and new units within the concept plan area. There's been some formatting for better readability. And within this chapter, there will be a setback of 40 feet between dwellings. That's dwelling, an existing dwelling outside the concept plan area and a new dwelling within the concept plan area must be separated by at least 40 feet. We had also discussed at the Planning Commission level having the transition area specify that lots in the new development areas would have to meet the minimum lot sizes for the abutting existing adjacent residential zone. The City Commission asked us to be more specific and make sure that, my next slide will explain this. City Commission wished for the transition lots to meet all of the minimum dimensional standards of the abutting zone district outside the concept plan area, not just the minimum lot size. So that would apply to lot depth, lot width, lot size, setbacks, and height limits for the unit types. City Commission directed staff not to change the code to allow multifamily in the R3.5's district without a type 3 master plan, which is what the current code requires. As I've mentioned in the past, there is no R3.5 currently in the Park Place concept plan. The default medium density zone in that area is the R5 zone. The R5 zone does not allow multifamily. But if someone were to request a zone change to R3.5 and have it approved, that would have potentially allowed for multifamily as a by right use in that zone. And the reason that we discussed doing that was because we needed to adopt a clear and objective standard for housing and couldn't have a discretionary path for a residential use. So we're keeping that section of code the same as it was based on City Commission direction. And similar provision for the medium density zone that transition lots meet the minimum dimensional standards of the abutting zone district, not just the minimum lot size. Next, the residential design standards that are applied to new home design and during the building permit process. This would be reviewed after a residential development has been approved and platted, but we needed to revise this to remove the formally discretionary language, which referred to various architectural styles, but did not provide any specific requirements for those styles. So we've added clear and objective design elements to improve visual interest, and this applies to all new residential development except the multifamily, live, work, and mixed use. Design elements that have been included and refined through this process include roof design and pitch, massing, porches, pedestrian connections, architectural details, materials, windows, garages, and accessory structures. On 1721 residential design, previously, as you know, we have proposed a requirement for a certain percentage of the acreage of a new residential development based on the size of that development to include up to 25% middle housing lots. And we had recommended previously that developments up to 2 acres in area have to provide lots for only one housing type. So if you had 2 acres, you would only be required to, you could just do single family detached residential. City Commission's consensus was to allow this only for developments up to 1 acre in size. So this table's been revised. 1.1 to 10 acres would be required to provide 15% of their lots for middle housing. 10.1 to 30 acres, 20%, 30.1 or more acres, up 25% middle housing lots. Along with that, we have written a new housing diversity standard that requires that those middle housing units be dispersed throughout the development. And I'll explain how that works. The code language requires that to achieve a better distribution of housing types within a residential development, no more than 3 middle housing lots shall be permitted to abut one another. For purposes of the section, abut or abutting means that lots share a common lot line for a minimum of 10 feet. Standard is applicable only to residential subdivisions or partitions that at the time of land use review. The middle housing lot shall be identified on preliminary plans and the final plat of the subdivision through a plat note. And following recordation of a final plat that complies with that section, the standard shall be deemed to have been met. Standard does not preclude future additional middle housing units or middle housing land divisions within a residential subdivision or partition, even if those additional units or lots may not comply with D, the abutment requirement. So we thought a lot about that and came up with this as a clear and objective way to try to disperse the middle housing units throughout the development. And the intent is to provide a minimum amount of middle housing dispersed more evenly throughout the development and not concentrated in one area. And that meets the intent of the concept plan to provide more diversity of housing and throughout the residential areas. Next, we'll be talking about the neighborhood commercial zone. The City Commission discussed neighborhood commercial uses at the September 4th meeting and gave a consensus that they wanted to see a limited set of uses that were intended to serve the neighborhoods nearby that would attract businesses and patrons alike and did not want to see uses that might dissuade visitors and businesses from the NC district. They also felt that requiring or allowing a percentage of residential use in the area would be challenging to regulate, and they recommended that we only prohibit ground floor residential use unless it's set back 100 feet from Livesey Road, and that would be adequate to protect the zone for commercial uses. In other words, you can still do residential use on the second floor if you're close to Livesey Road, but that would reserve your first floor for commercial use. This would not be applied to mixed use, this would not be applied to live-work units. On the uses section, this has been revised since you saw it last. The permitted uses in the zone we listed out individually rather than cross-referencing mixed-use corridor zone district as before. Also, the code that limits the maximum footprint of a building or buildings with these uses to 10,000 square feet has been relocated to this section. And you will see that many of these uses are the ones that we've discussed previously, and they include small-scale service uses and retail facilities. So the proposed revision for the code for prohibited uses states that residential use on the ground floor, unless set back a minimum of 100 feet from the property line along Livesey Road / Main Street, be prohibited. The dimensional standards for that zone include a minimum landscaping requirement of 20%, and the Planning Commission had added an allowance for low-impact development, like rain gardens and things that I just mentioned to be counted towards that minimum landscaping requirement. Next, we move into the additional standards that apply for the Park Place concept plan area, and that includes certain additional permitted uses. Planning Commission saw this language in August. The list of additional permitted civic uses has been revised to exclude mobile food units. Outdoor markets were already a permitted use in the neighborhood commercial zone, so there's no need to list as an additional permitted use here. To protect commercial land, off-site stormwater facilities less than a half acre and parkland improvements less than 0.75 acres added to this section so that those specific restrictions would only apply to the neighborhood commercial in the Park Place area. The size restrictions have been added to protect commercial land. If a park or an off-site stormwater facility needed more acreage, an applicant could make a variance application as part of their land use application or site plan and design review application. To make these facilities a better public amenity, City Commission recommended that there be a public access and maintenance agreement as well as certain recreational amenities, minimum of a soft surface trail at least 4 feet wide and at least 3 benches. Regarding residential uses in the NC zone, the additional standards were modified after initial review to allow a greater amount of residential use, but following City Commission discussion, the direction was to simplify the standard to only permit ground floor residential use if set back 100 feet from Livesey Road. The way that this is currently written right now, you'll notice 1 and 2 under D there. 1 states residential uses are permitted but shall not be located on the ground floor within the Park Place concept plan. Second, item 2 says all ground floor residential uses except for entrances for upper story residential use shall be set back a minimum of 100 feet from the property line along Livesey Road. So the way that section 1 and 2 currently reads, it creates a little confusion. Staff would recommend that this language be clarified, and I'll show you what that might look like on my next slide. So rather than what I just read out, we would replace it with the following. Residential uses are permitted but shall not be located on the ground floor within the Park Place Concept Plan Neighborhood Commercial Zone District except as provided under 2 below. And then we have the same statement under 2. So that new text highlighted in yellow, I believe, would take care of that conflict. Okay. Moving on. That takes care of the changes to the neighborhood commercial zone. Next, we'll be talking about the site plan and design review criteria and land division criteria for park, trail, and open space requirements. These revisions are an entirely new section of code devoted to park and trail dedication. Open space dedication is voluntary and based on existing requirements in the Natural Resources Overlay District. The intent of this code language is to have a clear and objective and proportional way to get to the 8-acre North Village Community Park. That has a minimum acreage dedication of 3 acres, and the South Village Neighborhood Park, which would have a minimum dedication size of 2 acres. Trails dedication would be consistent with the 2004 master plan. What you'll see is that we've added some additional language to cross-reference the soon-to-be adopted 2024 Parks Master Plan. So not a whole lot of changes with respect to the dedication aspect of this, but what I'll be talking about are the proposed clarifications for code to the fee in lieu of dedication. So there's a clarification of non-residential fee in lieu of dedication to be held in a separate account. I'll talk about that. System development charge reimbursement would be available through the process in our existing system development charge code. As I mentioned, we're going to cross-reference the 2024 Parks Master Plan. And we also wrote in some additional standards for acceptance of parkland dedication, including a maximum slope requirement, requirement that there'd be no wetlands within the park dedication area. However, a park dedication area could include up to half of the required vegetative corridor buffer that is specified in the Natural Resources Overlay District. And that buffer can be fairly extensive depending on where the protected resource is. It can vary from 15 feet up to 50 feet from the edge of the resource. Yes, you have a comment?
How many more slides do you have? I want to give folks an idea of how long until we get to them.
35, about 9.
None.
9.
Oh, okay.
But
all right.
The last few are fairly.
I just want to give folks an idea.
That sounds good.
Timeline.
So with respect to non-residential development, park dedication, so Park Place Concept Plan calls for provision of an 8 to 10 acre community park and a 3 to 5 acre neighborhood park. That would be connected by an extensive system of off-street and on-street trails. As with the discussion of critical road infrastructure, the city's constrained in its ability to exact parkland dedication and improvements to that which is roughly proportional to the impact of development. And we have proposed a formula similar to the one in place for residential development within Thimble Creek. That requires that the parkland dedication be based on the number of individuals in each dwelling multiplied by the number of dwelling units at 4 acres per 1,000, which is a ratio that comes out of the Parks Master Plan. Under that approach, every new housing unit would contribute its fair share for a park. If future development is so piecemeal that it precluded dedication of the minimum amount, the city would have to be prepared to buy whatever remaining pieces are necessary using funds collected through fee in lieu or through negotiation if necessary. The fee in lieu methodology that is written in here would be sorry, I will just make sure I'm on the correct slide here. So if it is commercial development, they would be allowed to pay a fee in lieu of dedication. And that would be equivalent to the system development charge for non-residential development. That would be paid prior to approval of a certificate of occupancy within a commercial development. And the fee in lieu would be retained in a dedicated account by the city for the acquisition of land for park, trail, and open space as depicted in the documents that are referenced in that section of code. And that includes the Trails Master Plan, the Parks Master Plan, and the Park Place Concept Plan. And once all of the land depicted in that set of reference plans is acquired, no further fee in lieu of dedication would be assessed. For residential development park dedication, we've included cross-references to the system development charge chapter on reimbursement for applications that propose more than the required amount of park or trail. The SDC chapter includes relevant methodology for requesting and calculating the amount of an eligible reimbursement for a public improvement, which includes parks and trails. And the fee in lieu of dedication section specifies that the fee in lieu be assessed based on SDC calculations at the time of land use application. And this simplifies and standardizes the calculation and assures consistency with the SDC chapter. We've also discussed how the fee in lieu account would be set up with our finance department, and they are of the opinion that it is a workable way that we can implement that fee in lieu. As far as the additional standards for acceptance of parkland dedication, for the North Village Park, which would be 8 acres, not more than 20% of the park may exceed 15% slope prior to grading. 0% of the park may include a wetland, stream, or other protected resource, except that up to half of the required vegetative corridor width adjacent to a protected resource specified in the Natural Resource Overlay District may be included within the park boundary. For the South Village Neighborhood Park, it's similar, except that no more than 10% of the park may exceed 15%. With respect to the trail dedication standards, we've added a clarification for a cross-reference to the 2024 Parks Master Plan. There is an option for fee in lieu of dedication for trails. The amount of dedication of trail is based on the ratio of 0.35 miles per 1,000 residents. This equates to 1.8 feet of linear trail per resident. And as you recall, there are also width requirements, soft surface and hard surface requirements in the code that we've already discussed. If the above standards cannot be met for dedication, a fee in lieu is acceptable. Fee in lieu shall be determined by a licensed city-selected appraiser retained by the applicant, who would value the market rate of the land, assuming that zoning and other land use entitlements are necessary for trails are in place. Trail dedication may also be eligible for SDC credits if more than a proportionate share is dedicated and built, and fee in lieu may also be eligible for SDC credits pursuant to the System Development Charge chapter. Final amendment, which the City Commission did not make any changes to, is the Master Plans and Planned Unit Developments chapter, where we added language that explained that there is a clear and objective process that meets code for housing, and and if an applicant chooses a discretionary process, then they can opt for the master plan type 3 review through the Planning Commission. So that's the overview of the code amendments. The process from here forward, we'll work through the public comments, and we'll see where this goes. Thanks.
Thank you. We're 2 hours. Let's take a 5-minute break for restrooms and stretching and such. We'll be back at 9 o'clock.
some comments after everyone speaks first, so.
That's fair. Okay. All right, going down the list here, are there any representatives of a recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization? Okay, we'll move on to individual comments. I've got a stack of cards here. We are going to be enforcing the 3-minute time limit because it's late and there's a lot of folks. So we'll start off with Garrett Stevenson on top.
For that is that we are just now getting into some of the financial aspects of this proposed code amendment, and we do have concerns about some of the dedication and fee in lieu requirements. We haven't really been able to see what that looks like on paper, but we'd like to take a look at that. We'd also like to take a look at the impacts of some of the proposed development regulations on the type of housing that could be potentially constructed here, and whether or not these new regulations would increase the cost of that housing, which we suspect it might in certain instances. With me tonight, who I believe is in person before you, is Harlan Borough, also with ICON, and he's here to talk about some of the design standard issues that we took a look at, including alleys, garage orientations, and the design standards in neighborhood commercial. I'm not going to double dip on that particular testimony, but we did submit a letter today addressing some of our concerns on these design standards. And the only one I did really want to touch on is the middle housing mandate. To be honest with you, we have not been confronted with a mandate before to provide a certain amount of middle housing. We're not sure how that really works in terms of the marketability of the lots or future homes. But one of the obvious concerns we have is the restriction on the ability to do more than 3 middle housing lots in a row, because what that does, at least as we see it, and perhaps we're misreading the proposed code, but what that does is it prohibits us from doing something that I think that the city has been interested in the past, which is townhome blocks that are alley loaded next to some of the collectors. So we've got some concerns about that. We're not sure that that provision really is going to result in what the city actually wants to see there. So we want to talk a little bit more about that at a future date. On the fee in lieu and park dedication issue, and this is going to be my last comment, I'm still sorting through that, but one of the major concerns that we have is that it appears to us, based on the proposed code, that those park dedication requirements and then, of course, the optional fee in lieu would be in addition to the system development charges that would otherwise be assessed. And we're concerned that that would present essentially a double dipping scenario where if we weren't in Park Place or perhaps Thimble Creek, that if we were building homes in Oregon City, we would pay our parks SDCs and that would be the end of that. However, in these two areas,
Garrett,
the city appears to be setting up a regime
Garrett,
where
Garrett,
we've got
you can wrap up
to dedicate and then plus a requirement to pay those SDCs. So we'd like
Garrett,
some
can
additional
you hear
time
me?
to digest this and provide some additional testimony. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, we have Jennifer Arnold.
Before you start, Ms. Arnold, I will try to give you a heads up when you have 1 minute left. And we do have the timer going, but I don't believe that you can see that on your end.
That's correct. Thank you so much for that heads up. So I'm Jennifer Arnold. I'm with Emirio Design. I'm also pseudo representing Icon Construction. They are in person, so they will be giving further testimony. More than anything, I am wanting to point out the written submittal that was sent in earlier today. That kind of notes a handful of the development changes in the code and how it relates to the cost with development, particularly as it relates to garage design and orientation and alley loading requirements, or just the concept of an alley in general. I'm also with Garrett and hoping that there's a continuance to this hearing, as the information before us is quite large and it's a lot to digest on a short time frame. So continuance to bring this topic up at a later meeting would be desired by many, and I appreciate your time. I also want to apologize for a spelling error with Commissioner Stoll's name. I do apologize for that, and I'll make that note for future testimony. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have Harlan Barrow.
I thought I was going to go first and introduce them, but we can modify that. So good evening, Chair Stoll and members of the Planning Commission and city staff. My name is Harlan Barrow, and I am the Land Development Acquisition Manager at Icon Construction and Development. We're based in West Lynn and have been a developer and home builder in Oregon City for many years. As you may know, Icon and its affiliated entities are one of the larger landowners in the North Village of the Park Place Concept Plan area. We are actively engaged in working with the city to find mutually agreeable pathways and processes to achieve many of the most important goals and objectives of the Park Place Concept Plan and other city infrastructure master plans, especially the much-needed north-south Holly Lane arterial connection between Holcomb Boulevard and Redland Road. We commend the staff on the hard work that they have put in, and the Planning Commission working through this difficult and detailed process since May. A number of the proposed changes have material financial implications to the development within the Park Place Concept Plan area. Although we have followed the prior meetings, until last week we did not know what the final version looked like, and there is a significant amount of material to digest. As such, we respectfully request the Planning Commission keep the comment period open and accept additional public comment in the next regular Planning Commission meeting. While there are many areas that we support, there are a number of topics which we disagree with in the proposed changes. Written testimony has been provided by Garrett and Jennifer. I encourage you to take a look at that when you can. At a high level, the major areas where we have disagreements are the park and trail dedication or fee in lieu payments. As Garrett mentioned, the written testimony details why we believe proper remuneration for dedicating or paying fee in lieu for otherwise developable land is necessary. Assuming that issue is resolved, the process of putting the burden on earlier developers until the desired amount of park and trail land is acquired, while later developers reap the benefits but do not have to participate in the costs, seems unfair, and you should be reconsidering it. The second issue is with the garage orientation standards. Icon presented letters and testimony back in 2018 and 2019 explaining in great detail why it made no sense to prohibit front-loaded garages while requiring only side, rear, detached, or alley-loaded garages. Because the requirement is not contemplated in the Park Place Concept Plan, it greatly increases the cost of development and house construction, both of which run counter to the goals of affordability. And such garages are not what the market really wants and will limit the kind of builders who will build there. Thank you for the opportunity to provide these comments, and we look forward to working with the city crafting meaningful and economically viable amendments.
All right, thank you. Next we have Dolores Rund.
Commissioner Stoll, she indicated to me that she no longer had a question.
Okay. Next is Roya Mansouri.
push it?
The green light needs to be on.
Oh, okay, there it goes. Okay, Tom should hear me now. All right, my name's Roy Mansouri. I live next to the proposed area. You guys have seen me before. I had some comments to say, but I had to revise things because even though I read through everything before, this did explain things a lot better. So I really do appreciate that. So again, we are living in a property that is adjacent to the area. I do like a lot of the ideas that I'm hearing. I really do have concerns. I'm trying to figure out kind of what the plan going forward is with constructing anything in that site. I think the Park Place idea is to really create that village-like feel and a park-like place, which the prior presentation of the construction that was given by ICON, I didn't feel like it really met any of those. So, you know, concerns would be the green space, the trails. I'd like to see more information about where those parks would be and where those trails would be. Also, how the buffer zones would work, how the houses would be set back from the surrounding neighborhoods. I would disagree with Garrett about, and I know here obviously for different reasons, I like the idea of having mixed lot sizes where you would only have 3 smaller houses in a row rather than having a row of houses like that. It makes it look very cramped. And if you're trying to preserve that park feel, I think it makes more sense to have a mixed diversity, I guess, for lack of a better word. I think one question I had was I don't really quite understand how the through roads are going to work yet. I know that's probably not with as much explained tonight, but I'd like to hear more about that. I think side or backloaded garages I actually prefer. I think it still looks better. I think there is a market for it. It has been used in other construction developments for decades. There's one in Bend. So again, I would respectfully disagree with that. Anyway, that's mostly all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Next we have Enoch Wong.
Hello, Enoch Wong. I live in Oregon City, immediately adjacent to the development at the northeast corner and where that neck is. I want to appreciate the opportunity to make some comments here. I think the biggest comment I had was that this all came about as quite a surprise because the first official notification we received was about today's meeting, and then reading through it, finding out that all this work had been done prior to this, and then hearing that this is a legislative meeting made me immediately think, all right, are they codifying things tonight? Did we miss our opportunity? It raised a lot of anxiety, and I hope that we didn't miss any previous notifications. But it sounds like we didn't, but I would just encourage every opportunity to reach out to the neighboring community to make sure that we're aware and are included in this decision-making, because you're immediately left with questioning our opportunity to make input into the decisions. I was very pleased to hear about some of the recommendations that were discussed today, but I did have some questions that I'd love to hear more about some of these recommendations, like the 40-foot setback from the lot edge. Is that between buildings or is it from the property line? And this zoning requirement to maintain the same zoning as the abutting properties that apply if you're not in the urban growth boundary, because our property is right on the border. We are outside of it, but the ICON property is inside of it. If we're zoned R10 with 1 property per 10 acres, does that mean that everything abutting us is also 1 property for every 10 acres? I didn't quite understand that. And reading or hearing about some of the NROD discussions about the buffer zones and the park, we raised several questions a year plus ago about whether there were wetlands on that northeast corner, according to geological surveys, and I don't know whether any of those concerns were ever satisfactorily answered, or whether they were just kind of put aside because the whole proposal was not approved. Basically, I want to thank you for pursuing a lot of the recommendations that you've made, but I would love to hear more information, and I'd love to get more clarification on some of those things. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have, excuse me, next we have Barbara Cox.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I appreciate it. I had two things that I wanted to say, but after talking with Mr. Walter, I think I'm going to forgo one. I have very significant concerns about the trail system, and I'm going to save that into a meeting where maybe it might make more sense.
A little bit closer to the mic.
Yeah, sorry about that. The other concern I have, however, is the plan to, as far as I can see anyway, to attach Swan Road and Beamer Road, the end of Beamer Road being going to be extended to Swan, which will mean that traffic is going to some extent, travel down Beamer Road, for example, towards the market and all. Beamer Road has a lot of children on it, young children, and there are places on that road where if you are parked on the side of the road, it's only one lane. Cars need to stop. We've got kids riding on with little scooter things and, little things with big little helmets, but God, they're scary and, they're driving on the road. The sidewalk on Beamer Way switches sides at times, so if you're going to stay on the sidewalk, you're going to have to cross the road, and I think that that's a bad idea, frankly. I think that Beamer Way does not need that extra traffic, and I don't think there's enough benefit that the traffic can't continue on to Holcomb and then continue wherever they want to go, but continue up Swan to Holcomb. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have Sam Wolf. There's Sam Wolf.
I do not see Sam in the audience.
You must have left.
Tom Guile is next.
Hi, folks. Greetings, commissioners. Tom Guile. I haven't been here in over a year. I thought I was done with this. I'm astounded that here I am again on the same subject of 21 years. The subject and stress has aged me and taken its toll on my trust in local government. I've been listening to you tonight, and I don't mean any offensive comments, but again, I've been hearing it outside as well. I know the reason why you allowed two people to go ahead of all this, but over these 21 years, I've watched it several times where Park Place has several people in the room, it's packed, and you choose to let somebody else go ahead, only two people, because I know it's staff time, but look how many people you've lost. And that happens so many times when you have Park Place hearings. They come here honestly to give comments, and then they end up leaving because they get tired of sitting around waiting. For the ensuing years, I and others have made useless treks to City Hall and took up your time with citizen comments. I have stirred up enough citizens to pack these chambers. I listened just a minute ago. I've changed all my comments too about alleyways. That was part of the original Park Place concept plan. And now ICON wants to go and change the original concept plan. Here we go again. The City Commission finally voted a resounding no to this development after listening to citizen comments for a long time. And I thought it was done. But then Big Bucks ICON took it to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. Then our city staff has worked you through all sorts of code changes in order to make this gigantic ICON overdevelopment into an acceptable type 2 that will become before you shortly. I guess the application's already in. An attempt to bypass and stifle citizen comments. Sure, the public can provide written public comments, but of course this is nicely kept quiet. I understand that code amendments are necessary, but the traffic issue has still not been fully addressed. Currently, this new development will only have one way in and one way out, and our 43 homes in Trailview will take the brunt of cut-through traffic, as he commented on Cattle Drive, or you did, Cattle Drive and Journey Drive. That's just been the road. The road has been described as a long-term objective. In other words, we're going to be stuck with all that traffic. If you look at where they're doing the development, it's encircles Trailview. Those people are going to make cut-throughs here, and if you have homes here and they have to come all the way back up here to get on Holcomb Boulevard, we have no evacuation plan. You've heard it before, but I'm going to repeat it again. We had fires just a few years ago, and we were stuck for over an hour in our development. We could not get out. Holcomb Boulevard was blocked up because Holcomb was backed up. Excuse me, Redmond was backed up because 205, 213 were backed up. Pretty soon, we're going to burn in our cars trying to get out of that neighborhood because of what ICON is planning. And if we do, I hope that our relatives sue the hell out of Oregon City for letting this traffic plan go through with ICON when their big development that they want to make with no plans, no evacuation plans to let us get out of our neighborhood. Thank you. And you'll see me again. I can't believe I have to come back again, thanks to ICON.
Thank you. Next up, we have Joyce Carlson.
Joyce, right? Yeah. I'm off of Holcomb Beamer, and I agree with her about the Beamer traffic. My concern is the trails you want to put in our backyards. And there's a reason why we live on that side of the street. We want our privacy and nature. I grew up there, roaming in the canyon and the creek. That's my birthplace. And I don't want people walking through my yard next to my clothesline with my unmentionables on them. Picking my, going by my blueberry bushes that I purchase and plant and my cherry trees and whatnot. That's my garden. And that's my natural area where that's my therapy, to go in nature. And I don't want all that traffic coming through my backyard next to me, and I feel like that's going to bring in crime and destruction, and it could impact my home even being vandalized or broken into, or and garbage all over the land. I looked at the trail. By the time they get to my house, they're going to need to use a restroom, to put it nicely. And I don't want that. I don't think that's right. That's my backyard, my safe haven. And we have landslides back there in my lifetime. It's unstable land. There's marshy quicksand areas, and it's unstable. We have a lot of wildlife back there that's going to get disturbed if people are tramping through. And not to mention plants and other natural things, and I'm not very good at speaking, the natural wildlife and the trees and fauna and flora, I guess is what you call it. This isn't protecting natural land and resources. It's bringing in destruction and wrecking that natural wild habitat as it is. It's going to disturb it. And on top of that, I don't want that traffic coming through my backyard. Would you want someone walking through your backyard in your garden? Any of you? Is that something you would want? A whole who knows who walking through your backyard? So I'm against that. I don't think it's right. And I think it's just going to turn into a bad thing, bring crime and homeless people maybe. I mean, there's already people around on Holcomb that I've seen. So it's just I don't feel comfortable with having all that opened up, and I live alone. So I feel like it's too close to my backyard and my house, and where look out the kitchen window and there they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Duran.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I live in Oregon City near the proposed project, and I would like to request that when decisions are made regarding the Park Place concept plan and what's happening in this vicinity of Holcomb Boulevard, that planning commissioners, city staff, city commissioners visit the area. There's so much happening on Holcomb Boulevard. The Clackamas County Housing Authority is going to be rebuilding Clackamas Heights, which is going to bring in more traffic. Then the Clackamas County Housing Authority is going to sell Oregon City View Manor property. That's a 20-acre property, as I understand it. That's all going to get redeveloped. There's currently a large subdivision being built across from the Trailview subdivision to the north by Icon. 122 homes are going to go in, and I expect that to be a really nice neighborhood. I'm not opposed to development. I'm not opposed to the free market working, but when it comes to the Park Place concept plan, the fact that the traffic infrastructure, the roads, which are quite extensive, the Holly Lane extension, the Swan Road extension, those are needed first before any talk of development should occur. And if those roads can't be built, and I know it's complicated, partly city, partly county, then the development should not go through. I'm pro-growth, I'm pro-opportunities. My family benefits from a home that was built through a developer, and so I certainly understand and respect the desire of the city to have more housing opportunities and for a developer to be able to do that. But not without first building the infrastructure. It's a square peg in a round hole that's currently being proposed. And I feel like this is really a game of attrition. It's about getting worn down until finally we just give in and allow the project to go through. And I would just really ask city staff, planning commissioners, city commissioners, please go to the area and see everything that's happening on Holcomb, because it's more than just the Park Place concept plan. There's already so much happening. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Mark Holt Bennett.
Mark Holt Bennett. So I live in Trailview. I was actually the first home there 20 years ago. So I've been through the whole concept plan, and I've seen the annexations of all of it. And for time-wise, I double what this gentleman just said completely, and I also double what Tom Guile just said. So you know, if I would just repeat all that. But so in time-wise, the main and visit the area maybe more than once, maybe twice. The last gentleman is completely right. There's more and more development. It's all going on Holcomb, and there's 2 lanes. But specifically Trailview, you're going to put all these homes in there, and they're all going to funnel out of Winston onto Holcomb, which is already increasingly, like you said, the manor or whatever that's going to be developed. It reminded me earlier when they were talking about about 99E, about how the lights, when somebody crosses the street, it just backs up the traffic. Well, it's going to be backed up. I mean, sooner than later, but much sooner. You know, you said that the Holly Lane or extension or whatever, that's long term and maybe short term, but what he just said, I mean, for God's sake, if you could please build that road first, because it's just going to be like when somebody crosses the road on 99E. And so lastly, I was in that fire. I'm like 65. I've never been in a fire my whole life. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God. My wife picked me up at Kaiser Permanente where I work at 3 o'clock, and we went all the way home, and it was just Redland Road, and it was just a big pile up, and the cars were bumper to bumper all the way to Holcomb School, and it was just bizarre. I mean, I never wanted, I would wish that on my enemy. I mean, I was like, God, I'll leave and I'll come back and everything will be gone, and I didn't, you know, it was just nuts. And so at least if you had the second road, you know, you wouldn't, you have that one more, chance of not burning up or something like that, for lack of a better term. I think it's serious. I really do. And just having the other road is going to make it better, but you're still going to have Holcomb that's going to be, it's a 2-lane road, and obviously that's not going to be widened for a long time. I mean, I like history. I was doing a little bit of history. I mean, it's Barlow Road, actually. There's a house in the back, and they have an easement on their property where there's a wagon wheel. But, I mean, I was looking at the library recently, and I'm like, wow, Holcomb Road is kind of like the Barlow, wagon trail. But, so that's it. I mean, I implore you, please, go there twice. And I think it's really important if you build the extension first, because it's just, people will die if there's a fire. And I realized too, with the fire, I figured this out. It's like, you can't say, oh, what if it never happens? So you can't build something that you don't know that's going to happen. I completely get that concept. So, you could put down that argument, but thank you.
Thank you. We have next Megan Keogh.
Hi there. My name is Megan, and I live on Hollycrest Lane. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I live on Hollycrest Lane and in the proposed South Village. I am of a generation who's usually open to new ideas and embraces change. However, I firmly believe that the Park Place development is not only unnecessary, but poses a significant threat to our community's integrity. The decision to add more traffic on surrounding streets, specifically Holly Lane, to the project is deeply concerning, especially as we choose to move here to escape the congestion of city life and not have it follow us. I was not a part of the fire evacuation others have spoke about, but as someone who has trauma, being trapped by a fire and not being able to evacuate, I wouldn't wish that trauma on any person or family. When we purchased our home just over 2 years ago, we were unaware of this impending project, which feels like an unwelcome encroachment on our neighborhood. The proposed Park Place South will further intrude upon our lives by adding more dwellings in an area that is already strained. I struggle to understand the rationale behind introducing retail on Donovan Road, especially given the existing disruption from school traffic. My vision for our home has always been a sanctuary where I can start and raise a family, surrounded by tranquility of nature, a supportive community. The uncertainty created by these developments threatens not only our dreams, but the very fabric of what makes this neighborhood special. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? All right. Any commissioners have any questions for staff? Start with Commissioner LaSalle.
I don't have any questions for staff.
Oh, okay.
Another matter later.
Sure.
Legal question. Who would like it?
Carrie.
This is Richter. Okay. I noticed developers get some relief from design standards that make development more expensive. Would that apply to alleys? If they brought in documentation that proves it increases the cost of housing 20%, could they use that argument?
Alleys are not listed on the items that are eligible for waiver under Senate Bill 1537, but I would need to look into that a little bit more before I gave you a definitive answer. I need to look at the sort of scope of that to see if there's a catch-all that alleys might fall under.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get back to you. I'm assuming you're going to continue this.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll have that conversation shortly. Commissioner Laws.
I have a few things to hit. I don't know if you want to have a conversation first about like how to continue this or. I got like 6 topics.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see if anybody has any questions for staff before we have a discussion.
Okay.
Does anybody questions? Okay. Yeah, so we can open it up to discussion, how we want to continue, if we want to have a continuance, if we want to go later tonight. We got 20 minutes left, so.
As well, we do continue this. Do we want to continue an opportunity for residents to make public comment if we continue this?
No, it's on, it's on.
Okay. Do we want to continue public comment? Yep.
No, we're not asking you. This is a discussion here. Thank you.
Just so that more people had an opportunity to speak that had left at the beginning of our next meeting.
Thoughts?
This evening, we received 8 pages of new information and 30 pages of prior testimony dating back to January of 2019. As we're sitting here taking testimony, there's no possible way we can read those new 8 pages. I personally am somewhat offended by them giving this additional information to us on the date of the hearing when they could have given it plenty of time. There have been 2 requests in writing for continuation of tonight's hearing, and some of the information we were given in writing on the subject has been rejected by the City Commission already. So I would hope that this new information would, if we have a continuance, this new information would be put in as attachments. I get a nod from the city that it would be. So I would recommend that we continue this hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner LaSalle. I would agree with you 100%. It would give an opportunity for more public to speak that left earlier this evening. It would give a chance for staff to review the information that came in late this afternoon, even though it has been redone from 2018, 2019, and it would give the attorney a chance to go through it, and it would give us as planning commissioners. So I didn't get through all of it either, so I would recommend a continuation.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Dirk.
Okay, I agree with that. I know we have one of the larger landowners that has requested a continuance, which is understandable, but any landowner could have made that request. But we also heard from some landowners that they were unaware of this process up to today. And so a continuance would allow other people to maybe spread the word, get the word out there. There's probably more comments out there that people would like to be heard. So I agree with the continuance.
Yeah, and I'd say I agree with that. I think the continuance is appropriate, looking to hear from more of the community that's out there, the people that are going to be living adjacent to the development. I think if we had folks leaving that were looking to speak tonight, they should have another opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, and I just want to say that I share Commissioner LaSalle's distaste for multiple pages submitted immediately before a meeting. It's almost like a manipulative tactic to force us to delay. Do we have anything else on the agenda for the next meeting?
No.
No, okay. All right. Does anybody want to make a motion? Do we want to have a discussion first on what we heard tonight?
I motion we continue this to the next meeting. I also motion that the residents who live in the area make comments first so that we can hear what they have to say before anyone else, so that they can say what they need to say and go.
So one thing I'll say is that we take comments in the order they were received or registered. So the folks that, waited until later, they were at the bottom of the stack. The developer, I would assume, emailed earlier in the day. So that's why they went first.
And I'll second that motion as stated.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, can I add something to that? In case a lot of new comments come in, if there's going to be people that testify again, could we say it should be something new that it wasn't testified to during this meeting? Okay.
Okay.
You've got to identify the date certain for the meeting, which I believe will be October 14th. Aquila, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
It certainly is the chair's prerogative to take testimony from those who haven't testified already first, but I'd be reluctant to limit people's testimony to new issues. You could certainly encourage it, but we're not going to cut people off because they're restating things that have already been stated.
Okay, thank you. How would that look? Would we just start off with public testimony then? Is that how we would
Yes.
continue this hearing?
Just for sake of anyone who wasn't here, we'd probably give a very brief, introduction and then just turn it directly over to public comment.
Okay, and just so that we're clear for now, or we're clear right now, there's no applicant in this. This is a legislative application. This is not a development application, and so there's no applicant that has a burden of proof or anything like that. It's just straight public testimony,
Correct.
Including developers.
You realize October 14th is a holiday?
Correct, and there is no decision-making deadline either.
I believe the city is open on October 14th. And
October 14th.
So, Carrie, do we have a prohibition of having planning commission meetings on a federal holiday?
If the city is open, you can have the meeting.
And it's not a city holiday.
You're going to post notice on the 7th, so people will be aware.
The city is not closed that day.
Well, we can. So I'm going to point out that this is one of those months where we have 3 weeks between planning commission hearings, and so this is a question that can be answered tomorrow morning. It'll be posted, and that'll be cleared up. We have plenty of time, is what I'm saying.
I think we have to continue it to a date certain.
Oh, you're right.
Tonight while we're here. So I guess I would leave that up to the planning commission if you wanted to, if you're concerned that you will have low attendance because it's a federal holiday. The next meeting after October 14th is October 28th, and that is when the McLoughlin Boulevard legislative hearing will be coming back for the first hearing. That doesn't mean that that has to happen before you.
A list of holidays.
Okay. And yeah, we don't have October 14th as a city holiday at this point. So
okay.
We could have it that night. We could move it to the 28th. We could move it to later if you so choose.
I suggest we do the 28th and make this subject first on the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so we need a clarification of that motion then.
So the motion would be that we continue this hearing for October 28th, and that we try to, as much as possible, if possible, have the residents comment first, and then hopefully this could be our first topic, and our main focus at the beginning of the meeting. So that's my motion.
Second? All right, made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, and I'm just going to clarify that it's the general policy to take comments in the order that they were submitted. So let's just keep everything fair. No, it's fair. I understand. It's just procedure. Okay, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Laws?
Aye.
Commissioner Dole?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer?
Aye.
Chair Stoll?
Aye. All right, motion
And I'd
carries.
like an additional comment that anybody here left in attendance, if they know anybody that left, be sure to contact them, let them know they're going to have another opportunity.
Yep.
And just for clarification, that's October 28th, 7 o'clock in the same place here.
All right. Move on to the last item, communications.
I don't believe I have any communications
All right.
tonight.
Anyone else? Any communications? All right. Oh, go ahead.
Next meeting date.
Right, at this point, it will be October 28th.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're adjourned.